So right when I was starting my journey to try to make $1 million in a year, I was reading as many books as I possibly could. I was trying to learn every idea, tactic, and strategy out there that could make me into the type of person who could possibly make $1 million in a year. I had already learned that the biggest factor that separated the most successful people on the planet from the average person wasn't their IQ score, but it was that they had an entirely different way of thinking than the average person. When a normal person saw a dead end, a wall that was impossible to get through, the successful person saw a fun challenge to overcome. When a normal person saw an idea and they thought, oh, that idea is worthless, the successful person saw the gold mine that was hidden underneath. And when a normal person blames the government or blames other people or their circumstances for why they can't make enough money or they can't get a raise or they're not successful or, it's not their fault that their life's this way, successful-minded people would take extreme ownership, say that they're responsible for their lack of success, and then go out there and make the changes necessary to achieve that success. Extreme ownership is essentially this radical idea that everything in your life that happens to you is your fault and you need to take ownership and responsibility for it. Maybe you got rear-ended, that's your fault. Did you catch a cold? That's your fault. Get struck by lightning? That's your fault. You're probably like, wait, what? That's crazy. You can't actually believe this. Like, how could being struck by lightning possibly be your fault? How could getting rear-ended or getting sick possibly be your fault? Well, in the case of getting rear-ended, maybe you're braking too hard and you need to learn to give a little bit more room while you're braking. In the case of catching a cold, maybe you need to eat healthier and exercise so you can boost your immune system, or maybe you just need to wash your hands better. And in the case of getting struck by lightning, maybe you shouldn't be walking around in a thunderstorm in the first place. See, the whole point of extreme ownership is, what do you gain by saying something isn't your fault? What do you gain by not taking ownership of everything that happens to you in your life? Nothing. You gain nothing. In fact, you lose control of your life if you're saying it's other people's fault, you can't be successful. Then that means success is in their hands and it's up to them to choose if you get to be successful or not. However, taking extreme ownership gives you the ability to choose the outcome for every situation. Choosing extreme ownership requires you to take responsibility for your past decisions, to take responsibility for your present circumstances, but it also allows you to chart your future path. Most people, however, myself included many times, choose not to take extreme ownership. Instead, they choose to have what's called a victim mentality. A victim mentality might lead you to say things like, it's not my fault I'm struggling financially. It's my jerk boss's fault because he won't give me a raise. It's not my fault I'm not successful. I was dealt a really bad starting hand in life. It's not my fault I'm not successful. It's the economy. We just live in a really bad economy and it's impossible to be successful in today's current economy. I just wasn't rich enough to go to like a good school, and because I wasn't rich enough to go to a good school, I'll never be successful. It's impossible for me to be happy in this marriage because they just make me so miserable. Or this is one I hear all the time. That's easy for you to say, you have blank. I don't have blank, so I can't do that. That's a victim mentality, and a person with a victim mentality believes that they are a victim of other people. They're a victim of their circumstances, and because they're a victim of these things, they're not responsible for the outcome that they have been given. The problem with thinking like this is that when you decide to let other people determine if you're happy or successful, if it's your boss's fault that you're not financially successful, if it's your wife or your husband's fault that you don't have a happy marriage, then you have no control over the situation. It's in their hands. They get to choose if you have a happy marriage. They get to choose if you get a raise or you're financially successful. However, extreme ownership says the exact opposite. It's not your boss's fault you haven't got a raise. It's your fault you haven't got a raise. Or it's not your wife or your husband's fault that you don't have a happy marriage. It's your fault. The beautiful, awesome, freeing thing about thinking like this is that means the outcome, the next thing to happen, is in your hands. The ball is in your court and you get to choose what happens next, not other people. Maybe you do something simple like just ask for a raise. It's surprising how many people want a raise. They really desire to get paid more for what they do. They believe that they're worth more than they get paid, but they never actually ask for a raise. They're just expecting their boss to magically know that they want a raise. And when they don't get a raise, they get all offended like, oh, I didn't get a raise, they must not value me. In fact, my brother David does this all the time. He has asked for more raises than I've ever seen anyone else ask. And almost every time he's went to his boss and asked for a raise, he has gotten a raise. And the way he does this is he doesn't wait for his boss to notice all the good work he's doing. Instead, he goes to his boss and he says, hey, here's how much value I provided to this company. Here's in general how much money I think I'm making this company, and here's how much I think I'm worth. Will you give me a raise? If you're in a relationship or your marriage and it's not working out, extreme ownership says it's not their fault, it's your fault. You might feel like they're not listening to you. They don't appreciate you. They're just driving you up the wall. But have you ever stopped to think about what you're maybe doing? Maybe you don't listen to them. Maybe you're not taking good enough care of them. Maybe you should be the first one to say sorry and apologize for things. Maybe you should be going above and beyond to make the most awesome relationship possible. If you want them to be patient, maybe you should be patient first. If you want them to be more loving, maybe you should be more loving. If you want them to be more respectful, maybe you should be more respectful first. The reality is you can't change other people, but you can change yourself. A lot of times in a marriage, the things that are the really big problems are actually just really small problems that the other person does over and over and over and over and over again, and it just builds up and it builds up and it builds up. And in my marriage, a thing that bothers me and drives me crazy is that my wife is literally late to everything. No matter if she has 1 hour, she has 10 hours, she has 20 days, she will find a way somehow to be late to that thing. And it used to drive me so crazy. It used to frustrate me so much that like, how can I make sure she's on time? How can I make it so that she shows up to things on time? And I looked at it through a victim's mentality of how can I cause her to change? When in reality, the fix to that problem wasn't for me to fix her, but it was for me to re-examine the way I was looking at things. I had to ask myself, was it really worth fighting over her showing up 5 minutes late? Why was I choosing to be bothered so deeply by something as small as her being slightly late to an event? Once I changed myself and I changed the way I was viewing the problem, and I looked at myself for ways that I could improve who I was, the problem disappeared. Yes, she was still late to different things, but it didn't bother me anymore. And eventually she started getting frustrated at herself for being late to different things, and she on her own started to improve and get better at it. And the idea of extreme ownership, I've heard it from a lot of different authors, and they call it different things. I've heard the term radical ownership. I've heard the term just taking responsibility. But the phrase extreme ownership comes from the book called Extreme Ownership, and it's written by 2 ex-Navy SEALs. And in this book, they tell the story of these 2 boat crews, and it was from something called Hell Week, which is when they're trying out to become Navy SEALs. They have to do all these crazy different challenges, and if they pass, they got to keep going through these stages, and eventually they become a Navy SEAL. And in this part of the training, they have to go out on the ocean. They have these boats, they have to carry them, they're really heavy, they're soaking wet. They've been doing push-ups and sit-ups all day and running and non-stop for days and days and days and days on end, and they're just exhausted and tired. And during all that in the freezing cold water, they have to go out, there's waves crashing all over, and they do these races with these boat crews. And there was this one boat crew that was just crushing the competition. They were working together as a team. They would win almost every single time. And on the other end of the spectrum, there was another boat crew that would lose almost every single time. And the leader who was in charge of the boat crew that kept losing would blame everyone but himself for the results his boat crew was achieving. He'd say, oh, it's not fair, I'm stuck with these guys are the worst, they're horrible at this, they don't know how to row, and they're not fast enough, and they're not strong enough, and they're doing a bad job, and I'm telling them how to do it, but they're not listening. And he was just blaming everyone but himself for the results he was getting. So the people that were in charge decided, you know what, let's do a little experiment. Let's take the person who's in charge of the boat crew that's always winning, and the person who's in charge of the boat crew that's always losing, and let's switch their crews. So they put the person who's in charge of the A+ team that always won with the worst boat crew. And then they took the person who was blaming everyone but himself for his problems and stuck him with the best boat crew. And what happened was when the good leader went in with the boat crew that kept losing, he started encouraging them, he started coaching them, he started figuring out what the issues were. He took blame on himself, he took radical ownership, and he said, hey, we're gonna make this work. Instead of berating his crew, he started lifting them up, making them believe, inspiring them to believe that they could actually win this thing. And that boat crew, which was continually finishing in last place, then went on to continually dominate the races and win race after race after race. It turns out that the boat crew was actually one of the best boat crews out there. The problem wasn't the crew, the problem was the leader. And on a last note, obviously I'm not saying like extreme things like, you know, if your parent passed away, that you should be blaming yourself because your parent passed away because you didn't tell them to exercise more, you didn't tell them to eat better or something like that. Extreme ownership isn't about taking blame for things like that we can't change. It's about taking responsibility for our current circumstances so that we can move forward toward the goal we want to get to. And I know for some people, it's hard to understand the difference between those two concepts. And if you want more clarity on the idea or the concept of extreme ownership, I would recommend reading the book, Extreme Ownership. It's a great book. You'll get a lot more clarity on the concept of extreme ownership from that book. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. I try to go through and answer every question. And if this video has been helpful, please hit that like button. It helps my channel grow. And if you want to see more videos like this, make sure you hit the subscribe button and the little bell next to it to be notified each time I release a video like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.